Welcome to the Christian Business Concepts with your host, Harold Milby. Christian Business Concepts is dedicated to guiding companies and business owners in becoming effective, efficient, and successful through God's Word and godly principles. Now, here's your host, Harold Milby.
Hey, welcome back to episode 2 of Managing versus Coaching. And in the last episode, we talked about managing. And we talked about some of the things that we needed to do to be good at managing and some of the principles. But just to kind of refresh, we talked about the difference between managing and coaching, and that managing tells and coaching asks. Management focus on the task, whereas coaching is focused on the employee. Managing is more about compliance, whereas coaching is more collaborative. Managing is about policies, where coaching is about potential. Managing is about directing, whereas coaching is about teaching. Managing is about expectations, and coaching is about inspiration. Management is about aptitude, whereas coaching is about attitude. And management is more about directives versus coaching, which is more about development. So those were the two, and we talked a lot about when to coach. Coach during a crisis. You coach when an employee is inexperienced, when an employee has a lack of confidence, or when you have new directives. We talked about how to use different gears. So I just kind of wanted to go over those things. And now I want to talk about coaching. So first of all, let me say this. Coaching is not helping your employee gain skills or knowledge. That's not coaching. That's called training. One thing that I've noticed when speaking to managers and business owners is that their training is either weak or non-existent. And that's a real problem for just about every business. They've not developed processes. They've not developed those things that they need to make sure that they have a good training program. It's hard for your employees to meet your expectations without receiving the training that they need to be successful in that position. With what is available through access to the internet, there should never be a reason not to have properly trained employees. When you look at the example of Chick-fil-A, one of the reasons that Chick-fil-A is so successful is when you look at how well their employees are trained. They're trained on how to take your order. They're trained on how to deal with customers who are upset. They are trained on how to manage the store. They're trained on how to make sure that they have the proper amount of supplies at any given store at any given time. They highly train their people. And that's one of the things that makes Chick-fil-A so successful. So you've got to be able to train your people. It's hard to coach them if they don't have the skills and knowledge that they need. It's amazing the type of off-the-shelf training you can find really in a matter of seconds, by using something like Google or Ask. You can find video training, audio training, written training that's very detailed and very specific. If you or your company has the ability to develop your own training, then you can also use something like Moodle. Moodle is a app or a software that is used to organize, present, and develop training. It's used a lot in the education system. Moodle is a very secure, it's an open source learning platform. That was really originally developed for educators, but it's being very well received and utilized by many of the Fortune 500 companies. But no matter what size your company is, you can take advantage of these kinds of things, and even Moodle. It doesn't matter how big your company is, you can take advantage of it. Coaching is not counseling or therapy. As a boss, as a business owner, as a manager, as a pastor or someone in a church with leadership responsibilities, your job is not to help someone overcome their past. That's not your job. You're not there to, help them receive healing from emotional wounds. That's not your job. This is a business. In many cases, this coaching will have an effect, or it'll carry over into their personal life. but more as a unintended consequence. That's not what you're trying to do. A lot of the business concepts that we talk about on Christian Business Concepts, they're Christian concepts. It's God's word. So yeah, it can have an unintended consequence that can benefit the employee, but that's not the purpose of coaching. Coaching is not building a friendship with employees. That's not what coaching is. There are many managers that become ineffective with people that they lead because they want to be everybody's friend. They're more concerned about everyone liking them instead of being focused on removing barriers to better the employee performance, which is what coaching is all about. It's about helping that employee reach a new level of performance. And finally, coaching is not simply providing encouragement. Some managers and bosses see their primary responsibility as being the CEO or what I call the chief encouragement officer. Well, that's not their job. Now sometimes when you coach, you are encouraging them, but that's not the function of coaching. The coaching, again, is going back to helping that employee become a better performer. That's the really intention that we have for coaching. You can't just pretend that you walk around and you see these employees and you're trying to encourage them. They're not doing a very good job. They're not getting done what needs to be done. And we just pretend that there are no problems in that department. There's time for encouragement. I get it, but that's not the focus. So there are several reasons why people don't coach. Several reasons. Let's look at a few of them. So first of all, some people don't coach because they don't believe in it. Some managers and bosses do not believe in the concept of coaching. They just don't. The person that I used to work for, he was that way. He didn't see a real benefit in coaching. His attitude was, a leopard never changes his own spots. Okay, well, we're not talking about leopards. We're talking about people. And can people change? Yes, they can. I've seen it. I've seen them do it. Can people grow? Yes, they can. That's part of coaching. It's about development and helping that person develop into a better performer. In order to coach, you have to be willing to give up some control. I mean, that part of why they don't believe in it is because they have a controlling personality. And coaching is leading a employee to make the right choices and the right decisions on their own. And some people who have control issues, that's not what they want. They don't want to give up control. They don't want to give that up. They want to hang on to it. So though employee coaching is a fairly new leadership principle, it's got positive effects that are being seen in small and large companies alike. So you got to get over, your lack of belief in coaching. The next thing, coaching sometimes people fail to do because they're afraid of how the employee is going to react. Typically, employees have one of 5 reactions to coaching. One is anger, and that may be because of embarrassment of being confronted or because they think others will think less of them because they, quote unquote, need coaching. It could be for a lot of reasons, but that's one way. Another way that people respond to coaching is that they act surprised. They may have had no idea that they have a performance issue. And the reason they don't is because they've got these blind spots in their life or because they assume that they've been doing a great job before because they've not ever received any feedback to the contrary. So if you've got an employee that is not doing a good job, but you never deal with it until you're just about ready to fire the guy, you're doing a grave injustice to that employee and to your business. You've got to try to develop that person. Don't wait until it's too late and then they act surprised. Well, why didn't somebody tell me they didn't like the way I was doing this? I've seen it happen in departments before. It just kills morale. So, and it causes you not to trust the leadership in that department. So they act surprised. So one was anger, one was surprise, the other's defensive. And this can come because they overreact to criticism or they have a lack of trust in the person that's doing the coaching. They may think that they know better than the one who's trying to coach them. So they could be defensive. Another is just pure avoidance. And this can be one of the hardest to overcome as the person will agree to accept your coaching outwardly, but inwardly they reject your efforts and they'll continue their same behavior. So they just try to avoid it. And then the last one is appreciation. Some understand the importance of growth. They understand the importance of learning, and they're sincerely glad when a boss is willing to bring positive criticism that will help them increase their effectiveness and performance at work. Now, I happen to be one of those people. I never minded when the owner of the company would come to me and would give me constructive criticism, because I grow through that, I learn through that, I become a better person. I want to be better at what I'm doing a year from now than what I am now. I want to be a better person. So I appreciate coaching. While coaching is something almost anyone can do, it takes some specific skills to become really effective as a coach. You know, if you're a horrible listener, you're going to struggle at being a coach. In order to thrive as a coach, good listening skills is really kind of coaching 101. This is why some bosses are horrible at coaching their staff or employees. They don't listen. Great coaches become masters at asking questions and then listening to the answers. Now, here's a wisdom seed. Asking good questions helps others to become critical thinkers. Why? Because you're asking them very strategic questions to help them think critically about the task or about the issue of that discussion. You know, many times Jesus would answer a question by asking a question. You know what I'm saying? They would ask him a question, then he would turn around and ask them a question to answer their question. In fact, there are 307 times in the New Testament that he asked a question, and only 3 times in the Word of God where he actually answered a question directly. In Luke chapter 10, verse 25, verse 26, it says, "And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, What is written in the law? How do you read it? He said, How readest thou? That's what he's saying. How do you read that? How do you interpret it? He didn't answer the man's question. He asked him a question. Why? Because he was coaching him. He was trying to develop him. He was trying to get him to change his thinking and his mindset. So don't be afraid to ask questions that you already know the answer to. It's about them discovering something that they don't currently know. You know the answer, but you want them to help to discover it on your own. That's why it's so important to ask questions. Matthew chapter 20, verse 29 through 34. He says this, "And as they departed from Jericho, a great multitude followed him. And behold, 2 blind men sitting by the wayside, when they heard that Jesus passed by, cried out, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David. And the multitude rebuked them, because they should have held their peace. But they cried the more, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David. And Jesus stood still and called them and said, What will it be that I shall do unto you? And they said unto him, Lord, that our eyes may be opened. Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him." So think about this. There's 2 blind men. Everybody knew they were blind. Jesus knew they were blind. And they come to him and said, "Oh, thou Son of David." And Jesus looks at them and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" I would think that would have been pretty obvious, because they were blind. What do you think they want? They want to be able to see. They want to have their sight returned to them. Why did Jesus ask them, "What do you want?" Because he wanted to hear. He wanted them to hear what they were asking for. He also wanted to know where their faith was. So he said, "Well, we want you to touch our eyes and make us whole." But Jesus asked them that question because he already knew the answer. He knew that they wanted to have their sight returned to them. He knew that answer. But he asked them that specific question to help them, not for him to understand what they really wanted. He already knew. So when you're going to be asking questions when you're coaching, you want to ask leading questions. You want to ask them questions that allow them to talk, that allow them to reach down into the deeper parts of their thought process and try to understand what's taking place. So, for example, you want to ask those leading questions, anything that's got to do with how, who, what, where, when. What you're trying not to do is ask them questions where they can answer with yes or no. That's not what you're looking for. You want to ask questions that allow them to expand, and then you want to listen. Then you want to listen. Look at some of these examples of how Jesus asked questions. In Mark chapter 2 and verse 8, he says, "Why are you thinking such things in your heart?" Matthew chapter 6 and verse 28, "Why are you anxious about clothes?" Matthew chapter 7, verse 3, Jesus says, "Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, yet you fail to perceive the wooden beam in your own eye?" Matthew 8:26, Jesus says, "Why are you afraid?" John chapter 13, verse 12, he says, "Do you realize what I have done for you?" In John chapter 6, verse 65 through 67, he's talking about, and he says, "Do you also want to leave me?" In John 18:34, "Do you have your own idea, or is that someone else's idea?" John 21:16, "Do you love me?" In another passage, he says, "Do you believe I can do this?" So that's what I'm saying. There's 307 times that Jesus asked questions, and only 2 times in the New Testament where you see he answered a question. So clearly, he knew how to ask the right questions. Many of you are probably familiar with Colin Powell. He's a retired 4-star general and former Secretary of State. And he was not only a great leader on the battlefield, but he was also a great leader as the president's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And one of the reasons he was a great leader was because of his, what he considered to be, no BS open door policy. He believed in promoting a clash of ideas. He has been quoted as saying, "Use every means to encourage communication and never let rank or hierarchy get in the way." He was known for asking for battle assessments from privates and sergeants who were on the battlefield. He hated turf wars. He hated when people didn't stay in their, felt like that they had to stay in their own lane all the time, and thought that they were the enemy of good open communication. He wanted everyone to be a part of a flow of information. He felt that he was always prepared to brief the president if he had gathered as much information as possible. See, a good coach is one who has the ability to know how best to challenge an individual. Because when you're coaching, that's part of what you're doing. You're challenging them. That's part of development. Whether it's to overcome poor performance or to stretch a person's personal view of their capability, to complete a given task. Most people in the workplace want to be challenged by their boss. Most people do. Being challenged can bring growth in a person's life, and wanting to grow as an individual is as natural as breathing. Most people want to grow. Many of you know Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie, he's the guy he literally built a fortune producing steel. And he was known for challenging his employees. That was something that everybody knew he did well. He was able to challenge employees. So one time while he was touring one of his factories, he stopped and spoke to an employee. His name was Ralph, who was shoveling coal to stoke these furnaces. And after some discussion, Mr. Carnegie told the employee he should be working not by the hour, but by how much coal he shoveled into the furnace each day. And Ralph said he thought that no man could shovel more than a ton a day. And the incentive would not make much sense, wouldn't make that much of a difference if he was shoveling by the ton or anything. He didn't think it would make any difference in his performance. But Andrew Carnegie thought about it, and in the same day, he went out and he changed that guy's pay structure after he got back to his office. And several weeks later, he was walking around the same factory, and he made sure he wanted to go see Ralph to see how this new payment or this new pay program was working for him. And the first thing that Ralph did was tell him he would have never believed that a man could shovel more than a ton of coal a day. But because of the incentive, he was shoveling almost 3 times that amount. And when asked why, he looked at Mr. Carnegie and said, "Every time I throw in another shovel of coal, I say to myself, there's some more money for Ralph." So some people will never know what their potential is until someone comes along and challenges them. That's why it's so important to challenge people. Having the ability to encourage others is also a skill that needs to be developed in you if you want to be good at coaching. I'm talking about more than cheering your employees on. I'm talking about encouraging employees to grow in their knowledge, to develop new skills, to take the next step, to accept that additional responsibility. You know, when I conduct a national sales meeting, I always try to ask one or two of the salespeople to make a presentation for two reasons. One is that it challenges that salesperson. And the second is that the other salespeople accept this person as one of their own. So they're going to listen to him. He or she is in the trenches with them every day. They know what they're going through, so what they say is credible. Having insight is another skill needed if you're committed to being a good coach. You've got to have insight. Having insight is being able to see different perspectives and from different vantage points. It's being able to put yourself in another person's position. Insight is when you have that aha moment about a person or a thing or a situation. Webster defines insight as the ability to understand people and situations in a very clear and understanding way, and understanding of the true nature of something. All great leaders have this ability. Insight is about instinctively knowing the when, the how, the who of opportunities in crisis. To develop insight, you need to learn how to dissect problems into the very minute detail that they are. See things from multiple perspectives at the same time, and think completely outside the box, and think contrary to what is the normal way of thinking about a person or a situation. Another skill, very important, that's got to be learned in order to be successful at coaching employees is giving constructive criticism. That can be a very sensitive thing if you're not good at it. It can really hurt you if you're not good at it. But you need to learn how to give constructive criticism. Many people cringe when they hear those two words, and the reason is because they've had one or more bosses used constructive criticism to insult them and insult their emotions, to make a point, and then they call it constructive criticism, and it's not. You're just being mean-spirited. Constructive criticism is important in coaching because no one is perfect, and people will certainly make mistakes. And fortunately, some bosses they're the type leaders, they've never taken the time to learn the difference between insults and personal attacks and constructive criticism. It's not about personally attacking the person. It's about helping them to understand. It's about helping them to see things more clearly. Recently a man took his car to have it washed at a place that specialized in hand washing, not a machine, not running it through the machine, but, he took it in there. It's quite expensive, and they hand washed everything. And after it was completed, a young attendant motioned for the man to come and inspect the job that was done. And then the man climbed into the car and immediately began to scream and yell at this young attendant over the windshield still being dirty. And he said, "You must be blind. Can't you see how filthy that windshield is? You cleaned it again," the man said. And then after it was cleaned yet again, the man continued his tirade. "You're pathetic. It's still got spots and dirt. Clean it again." Then once again, the guy, he cleaned it, and thought he had it all taken care of. And this time the man was just absolutely furious. He said, I've had it. Where's the manager? I'm going to make sure you don't work here another moment. And so the guy, he went and got the manager, and so he brought him over and told him what was going on. And he walks over to the man, who's very upset. And the upset customer spends 5 minutes explaining how inept that this young guy was, and how he couldn't clean the window, and how he expected him to fire the guy. And the manager took one look at the customer and asked if he could borrow his glasses. He immediately took some tissue and he cleaned the man's filthy glasses and handed them back to him. And then the man was completely embarrassed, immediately apologized, and drove off. So when giving constructive criticism, be sure to do so with the thoughts that are not dirtied by your own negative attitudes, because that's what happens sometimes. You got a bad attitude, so it reflects on every criticism that you give. Constructive criticism is not personal. It's not, and it's not subjective. It's straightforward. It's a very straightforward presentation of facts without emotion or the desire to embarrass people. If you give constructive criticism, do it in private. It's just the way that you should do it. You're not trying to make the person feel good, nor are you trying to make them feel bad. You're just stating the facts, and sometimes facts can be brutal. This kind of positive criticism takes creativity in order to know how to frame it and present those facts with a sensitivity to that specific situation. So sometimes it should be soft, and other times it should be hard. Criticism may not be agreeable, but it's necessary. It fulfills that same function as pain in the human body. It calls attention to an unhealthy state of things. So there are two types of coaching sessions. There's a formal and an informal. An informal session is as simple as saying, hey, next time you may want to consider doing XYZ. And in these sessions, it's about pointing the employee in a very specific direction when there's a task that's been completed in a less efficient manner as you would have liked for it to have been done. A formal coaching session is used when the situation is more serious. It needs very much some focused attention. And then when you do that, be sure to do this in a private setting and in an environment that fosters some free thinking and thought, where they feel like they can talk freely. A formal session will follow what I call the growth model, and GROWTH, growth. So effective coaching through growth is this: growth. And it's been used by trainers and speakers on leadership to describe what takes place in an effective coaching session. So I want to go over that real quick. First is goals. The G stands for goals. Both you and the employee should agree upon what the issues and objectives are. This is the moment where the problems or the areas of change are explained in detail. The R is reality. This is a description of the effect that their actions or lack of actions have had on the company, customers, and or their teammates. This is the time to give examples and specific facts without emotion. Then the O in growth is options. This needs to be a two-way conversation. You get that person involved and you get them engaged. If they're a part of the developing the solution, they'll have an immediate ownership to it, and that's what you want. You want them to own it. This is where you help them develop an action plan. Then the W is wrap up. Discuss the agreed upon plan. So you've come up with a plan now just wrap it up. Hey, here's what we've decided to do according to what our discussion is, and this was your idea, however that goes. And this is the time you need to be very clear about your expectations. So you start by recapping that specific issue in your discussion that's led you both to the solution that you've come up with. And then T is for timetable. This is something many bosses forget to do. But if you don't do it, you may make the entire process just a complete waste of everybody's time. So you got to develop a timetable of when certain things are to be completed, establish benchmarks. Part of the solution may be that the employee must develop certain abilities or learn certain skills within a period of time. So you got to state that. This should not be open-ended. You should have agreed upon dates for this. You'll want to schedule a time for feedback in order to discuss the progress. They may come back and say, hey, we had a great idea, but it doesn't work. Here's why. Let them come back to you with that. Remember that one of the goals in coaching is to get the employee to engage in the process. So be sure that you ask plenty of these questions that we talked about during the growth session. And then the H in growth is history. Document. This is so critical. Be sure to take notes of your coaching session. It needs to include the specific points from each of the steps in the growth model. So you go through the GROWTH. Don't skip this step. Document your sessions. It gives you a way to see employees' progress very clearly. It also gives you the needed documentation that you need to even terminate an employee over a lack of performance if it gets to that point. Having the documentation will absolutely give you an upper hand in any grievance process. So good coaching is about analyzing your employees' skills and abilities and potential and helping them to remove barriers in their life in order to enable them to really get good at, to succeed, to really even excel in their career and their life. Don Shula, the longtime coach of the Miami Dolphins, said, I think what coaching is all about is taking players and analyzing their ability, put them in a position where they can excel within the framework of a team that's winning. And I hope that I've done that in my 33 years as a head coach. What a great thing to state with a person like Don Shula. Remember that a good balance between managing and coaching does not mean you're 50% coach and 50% manager. There's going to be times when you manage more than you coach, or vice versa. Be ready to evaluate the situation in order to determine whether it demands you coach or manage an employee. You're going to be surprised at how rounded and developed an employee can become by understanding how you utilize these two important components, managing and coaching. Lou Holtz said, I won't accept anything less than the best a player's capable of doing, and he has the right to expect the best I can do for him and the team. Bob Nelson said, you get the best effort from others not by lighting a fire beneath them, but by building a fire within them. And, of course, I'm a big Rick Pitino fan, and, Rick Pitino said, failure is good, it's fertilizer. Everything I've learned about coaching, I've learned from making mistakes. So you're going to make mistakes. Don't worry about it. Just continue to try to strive to be a better person and develop them into a really, really effective and efficient employee. Hey, thanks for tuning in to today's podcast, and look to hear from you soon. Be sure to let others know about the Christian Business Concepts podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into this week's Christian Business Concepts podcast. Go to ChristianBusinessConcepts.com for more information and resources. Be sure to check out other podcasts that will help you take your business and your personal life to a whole new level of success.